Welcome back to the next video in the series. As you can see in this video, we're going to start Unit 2, which is Communication and Networking Technologies. So just a quick chapter overview. We're going to show understanding of the purpose and benefits of networking devices. So for example, routers, hubs, gateways, bridges, right, etc. We're going to look at different types of network. Here's the pen. For example, a LAN, right, local area network, and WAN, right, wide area network. We're then going to explain client server and peer-to-peer models. We're going to look at thin client and thick client and the differences between them. Right, we're going to look at different topologies, bus, star, mesh, and hybrid. I think also point-to-point should be on there as well. Right, we're going to briefly look at cloud computing. We're going to compare wireless and wired networks. We're also going to look at the hardware that's used in a LAN, so for example switches. Right, we're going to look at the function of a router, so I guess looking at routers in a bit more detail. Right, then we're going to look at Ethernet, the Ethernet protocol, right, bus topology and how collisions are detected and avoided. Right, then we'll look at bit streaming, so for example videos, audio, and what there's going to be two times, real time and on demand. Right, then we'll look at the difference between the World Wide Web and the Internet. We'll also look at the hardware, or describe the hardware that's used to support the Internet. So I guess kind of similar to this, point one, right, just talking about networking devices. Right, then we'll look at IP addresses, right, why they're needed. We're also going to look at URLs, kind of breaking down the URL into its various parts. Right, and then we'll also talk about DNS as well. And then I think a couple of other things like NAT, also MAC addresses, right, I guess a few more things as well. The first part, they call it the evolution, purpose, and benefits of networking. And just an overview of this video, we're going to look at the definition and features of a network. Right, then we'll look briefly at client-server model versus the peer-to-peer model. Right, then we'll look at four different types of networks. So PAN, personal area network, right, LAN, local area network, MAN, metropolitan area network, and WAN, which is wide area network. Right, then we'll look at thin and thick clients. So I guess just those four things. Right, so first then, let's look at the definition of a network. And it's actually quite simple. So I think in the book, so they simply say, it's two or more devices connected together. A pretty simple definition. And this connection could either be wired or wireless. Now, probably we can think of these. A lot of people call it an Ethernet connection. I think, later we'll realize, they actually call it twisted pair. Right, there's also another type, coaxial. Fiber optic, people are probably familiar with. Of course, just using light. And then if we think, wireless, of course, that can be Wi-Fi, right? Also, for example, Bluetooth. Right, then let's think, what are clients and what are servers? So we need to understand these two terms. Right, a client, this is a device that's requesting, right, or asking for something. And that can be a file, that can be, I guess an email, right, making a database request. So asking for something to be printed. Right, and then there's a server, that's a device that's responding to or fulfilling that request. So of course, if a client is asking for a web page, then in that case, the web server is going to be the, the device that's obviously processing that request, generating the website, or let's say generating the web page, and then of course responding with that content back to the client. And if it's a web page, of course that's going to be HTML content that it's sending back. I guess we'll say JavaScript, CSS, or obviously any images, videos, audio, right, anything that's required for the page. So I think that's just what we said, right, making a web request. Again, of course, if it's a web request, right, if we think about the protocol, that's going to be an HTTP request, or these days probably HTTPS, where of course, the S just means secure, right, it's going to be encrypted. HTTP, right, there we go. Right, so if we think about a network, for regular users, they often associate a network as being the internet. So if people say, let's connect to the network, right, then people kind of use network and the internet interchangeably. However, there are actually more features, and I suppose businesses, schools, governments, hospitals, right, etc. Right, so they're going to use some of these extra features that a network can provide. So let's just see one of them. One of them is going to be communication, right, e.g. sending files or messages with other local devices, right, and or the kind of global internet. And of course, when it says local devices, that means other devices on the same network, right? So on the same LAN, right, on the same local area network. Right, then, I guess we'd also make a file server, so anyone with permission can access. All right, and I thought there's going to be more details here. And of course, when we say file server, of course, right, that's just going to have files, which, of course, people can download. Maybe we can also allow people to upload, people can move files, copy files. Just a file storage. Right then, well, application server, so here we can have software installed centrally in one location, but it can be used well by everyone in the company, school, hospital, right, etc. Right, there could also be an email server to send, receive, and store emails internally. So rather than, for example, using Gmail or some other email provider, of course, like maybe for privacy, right, they would prefer to actually store their emails internally, and of course, manage their email system internally. Right, could also have a database server, so of course, well, again, host database internally. And then we're also a print server. And to be honest, like when we say print server, I mean, basically that's just going to be a printer. And what that's going to do is going to allow many computers to connect to and use one printer. As opposed to having like an actual physical connection to a printer. Of course, this time while they connect right over wireless, then well, of course, send their documents to be printed, and the printer can then fulfill that request by printing them. And well, of course, this is etc. Because I'm sure there's many other examples. Right, so if we just look at all of these briefly, so a file server, well, we can create a file server and map it to an empty drive on your PC or on your device. For example, the F drive, because well, I suppose if we're using Windows, I mean, C is usually the default. I think what D is usually going to be the second drive, and then I guess F is kind of an empty one. Right then, well, okay, right. So then we can grant permissions, and right, these permissions can be granted either to individual users, right, or groups of users, right, allowing them to read, right, and or write those files. And of course, when it says groups, well, let's say for example we have a school. Now maybe like all the teachers can be in one group, and all the students can be in another group. Now, probably you would want to give the teachers more permission than the students, because realistically, well, like. Okay, I mean, like probably as people can imagine, right? If you give students full access to the network, well, people start going to deleting files, they start going to moving, renaming, right, pranking, it's kind of all kinds of problems. So the advantage of this, well, this means we only need one copy, okay, rather than a copy on every individual computer. So of course, well, the advantage that's going to save space. Is also going to ensure that we don't have conflicting versions or conflicting copies. Because let's say, for example, I don't know, like person A has a copy, person B has a copy. Well, maybe person A makes a change, right? Person B makes another change, right? But a different change. Well, now in this case, of course, person A and person B, like if they started with the same file, well, now since they've both made different changes, well, of course, well, now they're going to have different versions of that same file. And of course, if that's, I don't know, some like financial data, or it could be some timetable. Of course, right, that's going to cause all kinds of problems. So because of this, right, because we only have this one centralized file, right, that's going to make collaboration and organization easier. Because again, of course, everyone can just access the same file, right? Everyone can see the changes that other people have made. Right, then if we just look at the types of network from smallest to biggest, so well, PAN, personal area network, right, e.g. Bluetooth. So I suppose connecting your phone to your computer. Right, maybe connecting speakers to your computer, connect, I don't know, maybe like a wireless mouse, right, wireless keyboard, right, something like that. And of course, well, this is personal since if we think about a wireless mouse, well, that should really only connect to one device, right? So it's kind of, okay, so we can say it's kind of like a direct connection, right? It's a connection that other people can't, join in on. Right, then if we have LAN, right, so local area network, right, e.g. a router in, well, one building, one home, right, one classroom, right, just, something like that. And I mean, well, of course, when we say local, I mean, I suppose, this could just be one person, but if you're thinking about a classroom, maybe you've got 20, 30 different devices connected to it. Right, then if we think about a MAN, well, right, this is going to be a metropolitan area network. And of course, if we think, well, metropolitan, right, of course, that just means one city. So, for example, well, this can be like a city Wi-Fi, right? Maybe a city provides a free Wi-Fi, or maybe, for example, I don't know. Right, let's say maybe the subway system provides a free Wi-Fi, right? That would be like a metropolitan area network. Right, then finally, there's going to be a WAN, so wide area network, and that's going to be multiple cities or multiple countries. And we'll see later that, well, actually, the internet can just be considered as being a WAN, right? Of course, well, spanning, I mean, well, basically every country. Right, so the exam generally only asks about LANs and WANs, I mean, since they're the most common. Though I think, once or twice there has been a question probably just asking, what's a PAN? And also maybe MAN as well. Right, so if we look at a LAN, well, this is the network, this is the network within the same building. Right, nodes don't necessarily have to be connected to the internet, okay, they could just be connected to each other. And if you just have a private internet, well, a private internet is called what, an intranet, because of course what, I mean, intra just means internal, right? Whereas if we say what inter, I mean, this means kind of outside, right? I mean, yes, or everyone. Right, so well, Wi-Fi and Ethernet, and I suppose really rather than saying Ethernet, we should probably say twisted pair. Right, they're going to be the most common connection methods. Now, I mean, okay, right. So if you don't want, okay, right, if you don't know what a twisted pair cable is, but of course, right, in future lessons we'll see that. But I mean, like if you think informally, well, it's what people call an Ethernet cable. Yeah, of course, just to, let's say, connect their desktop computer, you know, to the router. Yeah, or connecting, I don't know, their PlayStation, right, yeah, to the router or something. Right, okay, then, well, all right, so, okay, so I guess on a LAN, you can also have different servers, like an application, file, print, or email servers. Of course, well, yeah, they can be used to share files, applications, right, etc. Yeah, and well, again, as mentioned, right, I guess, yeah, allowing the, yeah, okay, well, so, all right, okay, let's say allowing the site to have an internal email system. Now, to be honest, like, I mean, if you're thinking like one classroom, I mean, you're probably not going to want an email system. If you have a small business, I mean, maybe you would want this. Although, to be honest, if you're talking about like an internal email system, you know, you'd probably be looking at a WAN. Yeah, something bigger than just a LAN, to be honest. Right, so as an example then, well, here, yeah, okay, all right, here it is. Yeah, it's, you know, it's difficult to see this red pen right on this white background. All right, so of course, well, I mean, all right, so well, here's just a router in the middle. And well, of course, right, this time they're saying it's, yeah, being connected over Wi-Fi. Now, to be honest, I mean, you can also call this a switch, and we'll actually look at the difference between a router and a switch. Yeah, I think actually in the exam it's probably better to call this a switch. Right, well, of course, right, well, okay, then here they're just saying they've got some kind of server. It could be a file server, you know, database server, yeah, you know, anything. Then, of course, well, just various different devices connected to it. And then in this case, they're also saying that, well, the router is also going to provide a connection to the outside internet. Now, as mentioned, I mean, that's not required. Like, if we don't have this connection to the outside internet, well, then it's just going to be an intranet. And if you actually think, like, maybe people have played games where when you actually, you know, sort of join the online mode, well, either, of course, you can just connect, you know, to the sort of global, yeah, I don't know, okay, well, let's say the sort of global, like, player pool, right, or you can just play LAN. And, of course, well, if you play on LAN mode, well, that means you can only play with people that are on the same network. And of course, like if you think about that, well, that's going to be a faster connection, right? Lower latency, since rather than having to go to the sort of official game servers in, you know, whatever city they're in, well, in this case, you know, this only has to stay within your network. So yeah, of course, you know, the communication is only going a short distance, right? Therefore, it's going to be faster. Yeah, of course, you know, again, it's just staying within your network, which in most cases is, you know, probably just your house or your class. Right, so yeah, if we look at the most common server in a home environment, well, that's probably going to be a printer actually. And well, file, email, database servers would be more common, well, for businesses, schools, hospitals. Right, then if we look at the next one, so wide area network, right, computers, well, okay, right. Yeah, all right, so I mean, basically, well, they could be anywhere, right? Of course, well, they could be in a different city, they could be, yeah, on the other side of the world. It's going to allow sharing of files or software between all on the network. Of course, if you have an email server, right, also emails. Right, we can also run a job that could be run on a remote computer that had the required software, or e.g. processing some data. So this is kind of saying, well, okay, right, let's say this is our device here. Now maybe we have some, you know, big server in another city. Well, let's say, yeah, all right, okay, let's say we've got some data that we want to process. I know some report we want to make, some video we want to render. Well, of course, right, we could send that request to the server, you know, just by logging in. Of course, yeah, the server can then process that. And I guess when it's finished, it can then, you know, just send a notification back to us. Yeah, that's kind of what it's saying, right? Just, you know, we're talking about this remote computer. Right, so traditionally it's going to be slower than LANs. However, today, you know, with 100 gigabit per second, right, sort of internet connections, then yeah, this is probably not really much of an issue. Alright, so yeah, I guess we're just talking more, right? So traditionally locations would have been connected together with leased lines. And I suppose, okay, well, yeah, all right. So this is going to be if you got a company that's, well, yeah, I mean, probably some like multinational, you know, super rich company. What they can do, well, they can actually rent a wire, or like, okay, I mean, this is super small, but okay, all right. So if we look here at this telephone wire, now the problem with this, well, this is going to be shared by everyone. So if you have other people that are currently calling, well, then you're going to get interference, right? Yeah, well, Okay, all right, you can also have it where the line is just completely unavailable. Now, if you have a leased line, well, this means the company is permanently renting one of these lines, right? Therefore, well, of course, one is going to be expensive, but the good thing, well, of course, they're going to get the guaranteed connection. Yeah, you're never going to have unavailable, right, connection. Right, so these days fiber optic cables are often used, and different companies can buy different wavelengths to send the data along a shared line. Now, of course, like normal people are not going to have to do this, but if you're some, like Google or something, well, you're probably going to want to have, fast connections between your various different Google offices. And yeah, in that case, I guess, yeah, maybe you'd buy this. Right, there's also a software approach, SD-WAN. This is sometimes used due to its cheaper price. And to be honest, I think they asked about this one time in the exam. They said, yeah, what's the benefit of using SD-WAN? And yeah, I guess for that, just say, well, it's cheaper than actually kind of renting the physical wires, or yeah, renting the actual fiber optic cables. Then finally, it says switches will connect WAN locations together. Now, at the moment, don't really worry about what a switch is. Yeah, although maybe let's just kind of mention it briefly. So a switch, well, it's just going to be a central device, and you're going to have all these different wires coming into it. So let's say, I don't know, right, this is sort of network A, this is network B, right, network C, network D. And if we think, right, since it's a network, well, they're just going to have different IP addresses, right, different ranges. So if we have someone on network A that wants to send to someone on, let's say, network C, well, of course, right, network A is going to come in along this wire, right, then it's going to go inside the switch. The switch is going to look at the destination IP address, and if it sees that it's for network C, well, of course, right, then it's just going to send it out along this wire. So, you can kind of think of a switch as that, right? Of course, well, you're just going to have the signals coming in, and then, of course, it's just going to send it out, through the correct wire. Right. Yeah, well, okay, obviously, depending on who the receiver is, right, basically. So, to look at an example, well, right here we've got a WAN then, and right in this case, okay, where is it? Yeah, I don't know, like in this case, what is that, some sort of restaurant, or, yeah, who knows what that is. Right, of course, well, then here it looks like they've got some sort of factory. Right, they've also got something else. Right, okay, then here, well, we see they've got their main data center. Right, I guess they've got some sort of office. Now, if we look here, right, okay, they're also saying, okay, here we go. Right, okay, so they're also saying that someone from home can also connect to the network via a VPN. So what this means is, well, of course, right, they can work remotely. Okay, they can work from home, but yeah, just using a username and password. Right, then they can log into the company network, and of course, access all the files, access like their emails, yeah, I guess, communicate with other people on the network, right, etc. Yeah, and I guess, well, that's just saying what we've sort of said, yeah, so accessing the shared files, right, the email server, yeah, the intranet, right, the internal network. Right, so if we move on to the next thing, the client-server model, right, so hopefully you can remember the definitions we gave. That, well, client is just a device that sends a request, and a server, it's a device that fulfills that request, or a device that, sends a response back. So actually, like, if we think about this, okay, right, this here is literally just the client-server model, super simple. We're just saying, well, of course, yeah, a client sends a request, right, a server responds with that, or just responds with a request. So to see this simple example, well, I guess we've got three clients. Well, of course, we've got a PC, a smartphone, and a laptop. Of course, what the PC is obviously making a request, right? The server is doing some processing. Then, of course, yeah, the server is just, responding back. Right, so in real life, I guess, yeah, rather than just three, well, of course, there could be like millions of clients. Let's say, e.g., YouTube, e.g., users currently watching YouTube. So in these situations, there's also going to be multiple servers. But of course, the concept of clients requesting and well, servers, fulfilling or responding to those requests, is just going to be the same. So even if, okay, let's say here we have another server, well, in this case, right, okay, maybe now the PC is going to send a request to this one, and then, of course, yeah, this server just sends back. But yeah, it's still going to be the same. Right, so, well, let's think then, yeah, what kind of requests do you think that a client might make? And, well, you can pause the video if you want to have a think, although I think we have mentioned this already. So, right, let's just see some of the possible examples. Well, visiting visiting web pages, right, websites, and if you think, well, that's going to be over HTTPS, right, so hypertext transfer protocol, and again, well, the S, right, just means secure, right, or yeah, encrypted. We're also sending or receiving emails. So I guess we're sending emails. Actually, yeah, okay, all right. So I think this one, I always forget what it is. Maybe like maybe send or simple. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe send message transfer protocol, or yeah, maybe simple message transmission protocol, or something like that. But like if we think about this one, okay, well this one is just for sending emails, and in particular, right, okay, actually this is sending emails between email servers. So let's say if you've got a Gmail account and I don't know, someone else has like a Proton Mail account. Well, if you send an email from your Gmail account, well, it's then going to send it to the Proton Mail account, right, using this SMTP protocol. All right, well then if we look at POP3 IMAP, and to be honest, actually, yeah, this is not required for AS, right, this is just A2. But well, POP3 and IMAP, okay, well this is going to be what downloading, right, or receiving emails. Right, also while transferring files, and well again, right, that can be done over FTP, right, the file transfer protocol. So yeah, just uploading files to other people, right, or downloading files, yeah, from a server, for example. Right, also requesting information from a database, right, of course if it's a database server, right, sending files to the print server, and yeah, again, etc. Right, so the clients, well, I guess as well as being the actual physical device, okay, the client can also be considered the software making the requests on the client's device. Right, e.g., while the web browser would be the client in a web request. Right, the email program, yeah, I guess also the sort of email website, right, would be the client when sending or receiving emails. And yeah, I guess you could say something like, I don't know, yeah, the WhatsApp, right, desktop app would be another example, because of course, you're going to be requesting messages from the server, and then of course, yeah, the server is then going to be, sending those messages to you. Right, so if we look at the two types of clients, well, thin clients, thick clients, right, yeah, they can be grouped into two categories. So thin clients, well, we say, okay, right, little processing is performed on the client, or well, I guess we can say, yeah, little or even no. Right, it's mostly done on the server, and the client just displays it. And the display can either be a GUI, right, graphical user interface, right, or CLI. Now, don't really worry if you don't know what this is now. Okay, so like, right, basically, GUI, right, graphical user interface. That's just going to be a program with, I guess, right, we can say buttons, text boxes, sort of scroll, yeah, I know, like scroll boxes, like basically just things we can click on. Now, if we think CLI, well, command line interface, I mean, probably like most people are familiar with, command prompt. So yeah, command prompt, just the terminal, right, the black box that you sort of directly type the commands into. Right, then, well, thick clients, so here we say most processing is done on the client, not server. And actually, in the exam, I mean, sometimes they say most, I mean, often they say all. So yeah, I think maybe it's better in the exam just to say both, say, right, all/most, because, right, yeah, I guess it kind of depends on the degree of, yeah, like, well, the thickness, right, the thinness. Right, okay, so yeah, all right, so if we think, well, another word or another term, okay, they used to call them fat clients, but maybe since, some people consider fat as being offensive, right, that's why they sort of renamed it to thick clients. But if you actually see this, online, right, fat client, well, yeah, of course, right, that just means the same as thick clients. Right, so to see an example then, well, a thin client, what we say, and I guess this is our kind of, yeah, I guess our sort of, mini desktop here. So what we say, well, of course, right, we've got small processing on the client, or yeah, kind of little processing on the client. But then the server, well, of course, I mean, here, this is going to be a big server. Now, if in contrast, well, obviously, well, fat client, right, or thick client, here, well, of course, right, we've got a powerful, yeah, I guess, powerful resources on the client. Of course, in terms of memory, CPU, yeah, well, obviously, secondary storage. Whereas, yeah, if we look at the server, right, in comparison, the server is, relatively small. Or, well, obviously, yeah, compared with the thin client server. So again, yeah, just to recap, well, thin client limited or no processing capabilities, whereas, well, thick client has high processing capabilities, yeah, as we see here in this one. Right, so let's think the advantages of a thin client. So if we're talking about the company, well, basically they can save money since they can host the applications on a single server, and they can possibly get a license that will allow them to, yeah, well, all right, so okay, so let's say they can get, all right, okay, they can get a license that will allow them to use it on every device within the network, rather than needing individual devices, for, of course, for every device. Right, also the user doesn't have to download huge files, so think, well, Photoshop, which obviously, yeah, going to be several gigabytes. I guess, well, actually, I mean, of course, other software is even bigger than that. So the advantage of that, well, of course, like in this case, the okay, all right, so in this case, the software is just stored on the server, and probably you're going to access that, just, I don't know, just via some small web page, or yeah, some small, command line program, or yeah, I mean, just some, small display, basically. I mean, you're not having to download, right, all of the code that's actually sort of doing the processing, right, since that's just going to be on the server. Right, because of this, well, of course, yeah, it's going to save storage space. We only need one copy of the program, right, one copy of the files. Of course, it's just on the server. Right, I mean, this is just online, like, I suppose, yeah, according to some case studies, they say it's going to reduce costs by 70%. And, well, that's going to be what, administration, operation, and purchasing costs. Right, it's going to, well, again, according to this case study, right, they claim it can reduce energy usage by 97%. Now, to me, I mean, this seems a quite extreme reduction. But yeah, I don't know, like maybe. Right, okay, well, updates management, right, it's going to be easier, and that's because the updates management only need to be performed on the central server. If you think, right, okay, let's say you've got a big company and you've got what, I don't know, okay, all right, okay, so let's say you've got one server and then you've got like 1,000 computers. Well, if you wanted like 1,000 copies of Photoshop, then of course what you've got to update it 1,000 times, right? If someone, messes up the settings, right, if someone has a problem on their computer, well, then of course, yeah, you've got to fix it on every computer that it breaks on. So I think, yeah, I mean, this is kind of what we're saying here, right? It's going to be less downtime because, well, the IT staff only have to make sure that it's working on this central server. Of course, yeah, they don't need to fix it on like each of the 1,000 computers, right? Yeah, when it inevitably breaks. And of course, like a lot of people, like, yeah, I don't know, like maybe it's sort of not I don't know, yeah, I guess sort of not polite to say, but a lot of people are maybe slightly incompetent with technology. Yeah, they're always going to, break stuff. They're always going to accidentally delete files. So yeah, of course, it's just saving time for the IT staff, right? They're not having to worry about that. Since what you should have is, well, since it's stored on the central server, then there should be, let's say permissions, right, restrictions in place that are not going to allow the users to, modify these critical files, right? It's not going to allow the users to, delete these critical files. Right, so well, I guess even more advantages. Right, it's also going to be protected from protected from unauthorized software or viruses. And I suppose the reason for that is because you think, well, if we've only got a central server, then as long as this central server is secure, right, then in theory, well, yeah, okay, so in theory, like if that's secure, well, then of course, right, the programs, the files are secure. Whereas in contrast, if you have a copy of the files on, 1,000 different computers, well, then of course, like if one of those computers gets infected, then of course the hacker can get access to these, this data, these files. Whereas of course, yeah, just having one sort of central point, right, it's going to be easier just to protect that one point. Right, we can also say, well, data, and again, this depends on the setup, right? It depends on the permissions, but possibly there'll be restrictions where the data can't be copied right to the disk or saved to any location other than the server. So let's say you've got some like critical files, some like copyrighted, right, intellectual property stuff. Now you might not want it where the actual employees can download that, because let's say you have an employee that gets fired, or just an employee that like wants some extra money. Well, of course, right. I mean, they could then take these, they could take these sort of critical files. Of course, they could sell them to someone, right? They could sell them to a rival company, or yeah, they could blackmail the company saying like, if you don't give me a raise. Then of course I'll release them or whatever. So yeah, that's why it's good if you don't let the users or don't let the employees actually copy these files. And again, well, just since we mentioned, right, centralized makes it easier to manage, easier to monitor. Yeah, I think we said that previously. Right, again, well, I mean, yeah, kind of similar, right, setup is quicker because if you're thinking about installing files, well, again, we only need to install one time on this central server. Yeah, of course, we don't need to install, 1,000 times, right, on all the individual end devices or yeah, the sort of clients. Right, another advantage actually, and this is a big advantage, users can access the apps and data from virtually anywhere. Because well, if you remember the WAN diagram, right, if they're connected via a VPN, right, well then of course they can just log into the company network. And like even if they're at home, in theory they would still be able to access this. Of course, yeah, if a VPN is set up, right, if this is enabled. Right, so then if we look at thick client advantages, right, it's going to reduce load, so of course the amount of usage, right, hence the financial cost on the server, right, since it's offloaded to the client, right, or well, I guess kind of the users. So for websites so for web servers, websites, right, also some other software where you're just releasing to the general public, then if your clients aren't within the same company, then it makes sense that you want the client, which, well, in many cases that's going to be the browser if it's a website, right, to do as much of the processing as possible. since of course, well, in that case, they're the ones doing the processing, right, rather than your server doing the processing. And of course, yeah, well, I'm actually talking about this, right, reducing load on the server. Right, this can also provide quicker response times, since if we think, well, the processing is done on the, so the processing is done on the client, right, therefore we're not having to, send and receive data across the network. Of course, well, that's going to make it quicker, right, since it's just done locally. Right, often it's going to allow for greater customizability for individual users, because as mentioned, well, if they're installing the data and files, on their own machine, then in theory, they're probably going to be able to customize that more. Whereas, if it's only stored on the server, well, in the case of a thin client, well, probably there's going to be restrictions where, of course, they're not going to be able to modify it on the server, since otherwise, potentially, that's going to modify for all the other users as well, which, generally is probably not desirable. Right, it's also going to be easier for developers to create complex programs and GUIs that run locally, rather than on a central server, right, in the case of a thin client architecture. Right, so I think, probably the last part, right, file sharing. So there's going to be two models for file sharing. Well, the client-server model, which, I guess as we looked at, a client can request a file from the server and the server can send it, right, just respond. Right, then, the next one, peer-to-peer, right, or P2P model. Right, so each peer, and I guess, peer we can call node. I guess we can call them seeder. I mean, we can also call them leecher as well. Right, so they can store either the whole file or parts of the file. Right, so when the user is downloading, and actually, so downloading is also called leeching. Right, they could be downloading different parts of the file from different users. And if we say, so if the person is sending the file, well, then they're a seeder. Whereas, if they're downloading the file, all right, well, then they're a leecher. And if you think about, well, if you say someone is a leech, right, if someone is leeching, well, that has a negative connotation, because obviously, well, so what we can say, right, the more people that are downloading, basically that's going to slow down the network, right, whereas the more people that are seeding, right, the more people that are sending, well, I mean, that's going to speed up the network. So let's just look at a diagram of how this works. So actually, right, this first one is just the client-server model, as we've seen, right, one server, many different clients. Right, then if we see the peer-to-peer model, and if we look, this is actually going to be the BitTorrent protocol. So, right, I guess if we look at this one, so, well, this one they're saying is a destination and source. So, of course, well, destination, well, that's going to be receiving the files, right, or, so leeching the files. Right, if we say source, well, of course, right, they're going to be sending the files, or, seeding the files. So, if we see, so this person here, of course, well, right here, they're receiving this file. Right, also they're receiving, I guess some other files, right, from this other person, but we see that simultaneously, right, they're also sending another file to this person. So that's the thing. I mean, that's kind of the advantage. Well, right, of course, well, one, right, they can be downloading different parts of the same file, right, at the same time, right. Therefore, it's going to be faster. Or or let's say possibly it can be faster. It just depends on the connection speeds. Right, but at the same time, like, of course, we don't want every person to only be downloading, right? Otherwise there's going to be no one that's actually uploading for other people. All right, that's why at the same time as they're downloading, all right, they're also going to be they're also going to be uploading, well, either this file or other files to other users, right, or other peers. Just to keep the network healthy, right, to keep the network equal, rather than only having downloaders over, only having leechers, and having no uploaders or seeders. Right, so, well, I guess just to recap what we said, there's multiple seeders, right, sources, and they're sending different parts of the file, or files. Right, and then, well, peers, nodes, they can download or leech, right, and upload, which is, well, seed or send. And I think that's kind of the main thing. Like, I mean, if we just want to kind of go through that quickly. Let's say this is the file that we're downloading. Now, if we're talking the client-server model, well, the client-server model, of course, we're just going to start from bit 0, and what the server is just going to send the whole file, in order, right, up until, bit n, right, however many bits that is. Now, that's okay. I mean, it's going to be quite reliable, of course, starting from, bit 0, going to the end of the file. However, of course, it's also potentially going to be slow. Now, if we're thinking with a peer-to-peer model, well, what you can actually do, so let's say in our example, we just break it down into 4 parts, right, A, B, C, and D. So what you can have is, so let's say, well, peer A, of course, well, they can be sending the file. Peer B, they can be sending this part of the file. Obviously, C is sending this part of the file, D is sending this part of the file. So effectively, what we've got, we've got 4 people sending the file, well, let's say to, person E simultaneously. So in theory, this could be possibly 4 times faster. But again, I mean, this just depends on the connection quality. Like if you have a client server model that has a really fast connection, then of course that could be faster than if we have let's say seeders here with really slow connections. Right, so if we look at the advantages then of the client server model, well, one, we're going to be guaranteed to be able to get the whole file, since if it's on the client, if it's on the server, right, well then the server has the whole file, right? It's going to be a trusted source. Right, it's also going to be easy to set up and manage, right? We can easily add, delete, rename, right, copy files, since they're all stored in one place, right? They're all stored on one server. And right, so things, when we say easy to set up and manage, like of course we're talking about what the server administrator, we're not talking about the user that's downloading. I mean, of course, right, if we talk about that user, well, they're not going to have access to the server. I mean, this is only going to be the administrator that can of course log in. Right, probably there's also less viruses, because if you're downloading from a reputable company, then I guess you can be fairly sure, right, fairly confident that the download will be safe. Like let's say if you're downloading from, I don't know, like Microsoft.com. Now I don't know, I suppose there's going to be some people that will joke that obviously Microsoft, right, they're going to install malware, but like realistically, right, it's probably fairly reliable. Right, then we can also say, well, the user doesn't require additional software to download files, right, like they do with peer-to-peer. So, I mean, if we look at BitTorrent, well, I guess probably the most common program is literally just called BitTorrent. Of course, there's also other torrenting programs. I mean, uTorrent. I think there's QTorrent. There's various QBitTorrent. Right, and then finally, it's just saying that since we can also get fast downloads, for example, with modern networks, then of course the whole client server model is slow. Like this probably isn't that true, because just as an example, I think at university, right, if we want to download 1 gigabyte, I mean that only took about 20 seconds. So of course these days you can get super fast client server models. Right, then if we look at peer-to-peer, well, the advantages, right, I mean, well, here I said can be faster in orange because, well, this is maybe. Of course, this just depends, right? I mean, if we got a fast, if we got a fast server and a fast network, sort of as mentioned here, right, in this example at university, like then realistically, actually, like you're probably going to struggle to find a peer-to-peer that's faster. However, I guess if you do have individual peers that are fast, right, individual seeders that are fast, then in theory you can download faster. And because let's say the reason is that because, well, of course the file can be split and you can be downloading different parts of the file from different seeders, right, simultaneously. Rather than downloading the file, in one stream, right, sequential order, right, like you would from a sort of kind of regular traditional server. Right. Also, this so let's say if you've got a kind of healthy network, right, if the file is copied, right, among lots of different users, right, lots of different peers, then you can actually have multiple copies of the same file. So that's going to be resistant to server malfunctions. So if we think what a client server model, well, if you only have one server, now if this server goes down, all of these clients, well, they're going to be sending their request, but of course they're not going to be getting any response. Now, if in contrast you have a peer-to-peer, now let's say, this person A, right, person B, and well, let's say, peer C. Now, first, let's say they want to try and get the file from A. Well, let's say for some reason, A is offline, right, they've turned off their computer. Well, in that case, of course, they can try going to B instead. Having this redundancy is, well, of course, right, it's going to make it resilient. I guess another problem, like if you're talking about a regular company just using the server, well, if they go bankrupt, of course, then the server is going to be taken offline, right? Of course, they're going to shut everything down. I mean, this is more talking about sort of, I guess kind of like pirated content, copyrighted content. That's obviously going to be one use of, let's say the peer-to-peer model, right? And well, that kind of, sort of, I guess, kind of links in with this, right? More anonymized. That if you just have users, sending files among themselves, well, probably what they're going to be sending movies, they're going to be sending music, right? They're going to be sending, sort of cracked, pirated software. Whereas, of course, if that was just stored on a single server, well, I mean, all right, let's say, the police get access to that server, well, of course, they're going to shut the server down, they're going to take it offline. But in this case, since we have many people with the same copy, then, well, of course, it's going to make it more difficult, right, for that to get taken offline. Now, obviously, like, I'm not saying this is a good thing, but I mean, yeah, that's just, you know, a feature, right? Whether it's a good thing, whether it's a bad thing, yeah, I mean, it's just a sort of feature of the system. Alright, so then if we look at disadvantages of peer-to-peer, so one problem, well, if no one is actively seeding, then you won't be able to download the file. So although we did say, well, of course, alright, let's say we've got A and B that have the file, but the problem is, like, if these are just regular people, you know, regular people are using their laptop. Now, how many hours do they have their laptop open? You know, of course, how many hours do they actually have the sort of torrent program open? Now, if they only have it open for 2 hours a day, well, if you're alright, okay, let's say you've got person C here. Now, if person C is actually trying to download this file at a different time, when person A and person B are like, well, of course, right, when they've not got their computer on. Well, in this case, right, there's going to be no one that they can download the file from, right? But of course, yeah, therefore they're not going to be able to do anything. Whereas if you're talking about the client-server model, I mean, if it's a business, well, of course, I mean, what this server should be running 24/7, right? It's never going to turn off, for typical websites. Right, there's another problem that if a user only has part of the file, then you might get a situation where you're unable to download all of the file, right, or the complete file. So this can actually happen where, okay, let's say downloads get stuck at like 99 or even 99.9%. And like, because what you could, I don't know, okay, right, let's say this person has like 50% of the file, and yeah, maybe this person has another like 49% of the file. Now, of course, I mean, well, yeah, of course, you're not going to be able to get the whole file. Like you could even have a situation where, let's kind of draw it like this. So, well, okay, let's say, well, this first one is person A, right? This first one is B. Now, you could have it where, I don't know, okay, they have all of this, right? But then they don't have this part. And then, of course, yeah, they do have that part. Now, like, I guess you could also have sort of like this as well. Now, in this case, well, of course, both of them have got, well, I mean, this one has, I don't know, maybe 95, right? This one has, let's say, 98. So even though both of them have almost got the entire file, right? Since they both don't have the exact same chunks, well, then, of course, right, person C, person C, or, well, I guess, peer C, right, they're also not going to be able to download the complete file, right, since no one in the network actually has that part of the file. Right, so, and I guess, yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword. I mean, obviously, an advantage, it's going to be more anonymous, but because it's more anonymous, well, then there's also potentially, more malicious files, more viruses, right, things like that. Since people feel that, well, of course, they're sort of less likely to get tracked by the police. Right, so let's have a quick recap then. So, right, let's think, and I'd say for these, right, try and pause the video, have a go at these. Right, so do you know the definition for a network in a computer? And if we think, well, that's just going to be 2 or more devices connected together. Okay. Right, so let's try the next one. What 2 categories do we break devices down into, right? Hint, well, C and S. So C and S, I mean, hopefully you know what client and server. Right then, okay, so what devices might be considered clients and servers respectively? So if we think, well, clients, I mean, that's going to be anything accessing, well, anything requesting resource. So we can say, probably a laptop, a phone, or obviously a desktop. If we think servers, well, let's think, web servers, email servers, file servers, right, database servers, printers. I suppose for clients, well, I mean, you can also call them a dumb terminal. Now, a dumb terminal, I mean, that would also be another word for a thin client. Okay, so like what we're saying when we say dumb terminal, I mean, this is literally just going to be something with, right, okay, so, okay, yeah, right, this is going to be something just with input output, right? I mean, there's not really going to be any memory, right? There's not really going to be any storage, right? It's literally just going to be a screen, a mouse, and a keyboard. And of course, all of the processing is just done on the server. Right, of course, that's why it's right, dumb, right? There's, no memory, no storage. Well, of course, well, there's not going to be none, but it's just going to be like an extremely low amount. Right, okay, and servers, web servers, right, file servers, etc. Then let's ask, what is a LAN and a WAN, and when are each used, and what communication mediums do they use? So when it says communication mediums, well, we're talking, what sort of wire, right, what wireless technology. So hopefully you remember, well, LAN, of course, well, that's going to be local area network, right, WAN, well, wide area network. I mean, LAN, we can say what it's using, or let's say like I guess kind of what a home, a small office, maybe a classroom. Right, a WAN, well, in contrast, well, that's going to be connecting what networks in different cities or different countries. All right, and then, all right, so I guess, okay, right, as for the communication medium as well, of course, right, LAN can use Wi-Fi, right, also, well, twisted pair cables. And to be honest, right, I mean, these we'll actually look at in more detail, right, in a future lesson. I think WAN, we've sort of said that. All right, so these, well, they can use fiber optic, right, twisted pair, or even satellite. yeah, to connect the different locations, yeah, I guess in what different countries, different cities. Well, all right, so again, of course, we're going to look at these right in a future lesson. Right, then let's say, well, what are thick clients, right? Thin clients, what are the advantages, disadvantages of each? Right, okay, so whenever you say thick client, well, this is going to be what a client that does, all right, okay, let's say most or even all of the processing, right? The server does, well, little or no of the processing. Yeah, none of the processing. Right, of course, well, thin client's just the opposite, so it's going to be what a client that does kind of, yeah, a small amount. Yeah, okay, all right, okay, so a client that does a small amount or no processing, and of course, well, the server does, right, all or most of the processing. So if we think some of the advantages, well, I mean let's just sort of go because there's actually a huge amount of them. Rest of the advantages of thick clients, well, one is going to be reduced server load, and of course, well, that's because okay, obviously the processing is done on the client. Right. Also, you don't have to wait for the network transmission. Right. Therefore, it's going to be faster. I guess what greater control, greater customizability. Since you're actually installing the files. Okay. Sorry. Right. Since you're installing the software, and of course, well, yeah, I guess storing the files right on your end device. Right. And for developers, it's also easier to create programs for, since it's just a typical computer. Right, thin clients, well, yeah, I guess we sort of said that, right? So the advantage is, well, we've got a single copy of the program's data, right? Therefore, what is kind of easier to manage, right? It's going to be more consistent. Right, it's also going to use less storage. Right, it's going to allow remote access, so people can log in from, let's say, their home, right? Yeah, they can log in from a different location. Right, it's going to be cheaper since, well, again, we only need one copy of the program, sorry, therefore we only need one license. Yeah, I guess, well, I mean, here, of course, well, we need less storage, right? Therefore, it's cheaper. Right, it's going to be easier to install, manage, update, protect. Again, since we only have one copy in order to, well, of course, yeah, install, protect, right, etc. Right, I think we said it's going to use less energy because I suppose if you just have one big server, I mean, obviously that's going to be using a lot of energy, but then the individual clients, so of course, well, they're not using very much energy. Whereas in contrast, if we have, say, lots of, lots of big clients like this, right, and a thick client, well, I guess we're saying, this is going to use more energy, right, compared to, this system here. Right, there's also going to be less downtime since the users can't really sort of maliciously, all right, okay, let's not say maliciously because that kind of signifies that they did it intentionally. But let's say the users can't accidentally kind of mess up their system, right, either by deleting files or, changing the configuration, right, or settings. Right, and also the data is probably harder to copy, right, e.g. by, disgruntled, so angry, annoyed employee, who again, right, maybe they're looking for blackmail, maybe they're looking to, of course, sell it to, some rival company, right, make a bit of money. Now, I think actually that's happened with, for example, Tesla. Like, there was an employee at Tesla, and they were actually offered $1 million in order to, I guess, sort of take the copy of, the latest sort of Tesla model. I guess taking the blueprints of that. Right, if they put the blueprints on a USB and then, of course, gave it to, whoever it was that was trying to buy it, right, they were going to be given $1 million. But rather than doing this, right, this employee actually went to the Tesla managers, right, of course, informed them about this. And of course, Tesla was then able to, take actions to prevent this. Right, so if you think, what is the client-server model and how does it differ from the peer-to-peer model? Right, list some advantages of each. So of course, the client-server, you have a client that makes a request, the server, responds, right, or fulfills the request. Right, peer-to-peer, of course, you have many peers, right, many devices, they're all equal. So each, all right, okay, all right. So let's say each peer can send, right, or if we say send, that's also seeding, right. Each peer can also leech, which is downloading. And of course, we say that the files can be split, and of course, we can say that each seed, each leecher can be downloading different parts of the file, right, from different seeders, right, from different users. Right, so just to think about, some of the advantages, all right, so let's say the client-server model, right, some of the advantages, one, the whole file is going to be available, right, two, it's trustworthy, since, if we can trust the company that owns the server, therefore we can probably assume the files are going to be safe, less viruses, right, it's also going to be, it's going to be easy for the administrator to manage, since again, there's only, actually in real, or let's say in modern systems, right, there's probably more than one server, but even so, it's still going to be possible to manage because of course, you can log into the servers, right, you can, delete files, etc. Right, we also say that additional software is not required in, when we want to download, whereas if we think something like peer-to-peer, we're probably going to need something like BitTorrent. Right, so peer-to-peer, well, yeah, I think we said this, right? So the advantages, well, possibly we can, download faster since, well, we have simultaneous seeders, right, each sending different parts of the file. Right, it's also going to be resilient to nodes going down. Yeah, since hopefully we have multiple copies that are available on the network. However, on the other hand, like if sometimes, well, yeah, okay, so if sometimes like all the devices are offline, well, then we can have like no copies available. And again, well, it's going to be more anonymous. Now, as mentioned, well, of course, right, one, for privacy, that's a good thing. However, in terms of people sending you, all kinds of viruses, all kind of malware, then, I mean, well, of course, since it's anonymous, right, they're going to feel more confident when sending people that. Whereas, yeah, if, of course, they're using a server, well, when they actually, buy the server, right, possibly they're going to have to enter some sort of personal details. I mean, these days it's not, I guess it's not so much of an issue because, well, honestly, yeah, okay, so I guess you can say what you can buy a server anonymously. You can buy a server with cryptocurrency, right? You don't really have to use your real name. You don't have to use your credit card. But I mean, yeah, even so, right, peer to peer is still, probably more anonymous. All right, anyway, guys. So I think, yeah, okay, all right. So I think for that video, well, that's everything. I mean, that's been super long, but yeah, hopefully it was at least a little bit useful. Right, as always, well, any questions, just ask in the comments, and hopefully see you again in the next video.